All right, today we're going to tackle the breakup relief phenomenon by figuring out exactly how long you can realistically expect it to last. So if you're not familiar, the breakup relief stage is basically where someone breaks up with you and then they feel an initial sense of relief. And in my opinion, the breakup relief stage can last anywhere from 1 to 2 months from the onset of a breakup, with it taking roughly 5 months before individuals actually feel that they've been healed from the breakup. So in order to really fully understand how I came up with these calculations, I think the first thing we need to do is dive into a few core concepts. So figuring out how long the relief stage can last for a dumper is a lot like trying to solve a math problem, one whose variables are kind of constantly changing. Now, the best anyone can realistically do is come up with a template that works in most situations, but not all situations. And that's really what I am intending to do here with this specific discussion. So let's introduce you to the variables. So the first variable that I think you need to understand is my concept of the relationship death wheel. So I've actually created multiple graphics on this throughout the year, some of which have made me sort of semi-famous. I've been calling it the relationship death wheel. So basically, the idea is that we're showing this entire life cycle of a relationship from a dumper's perspective. So we're starting with what it was like for them to start the relationship with you all the way through a breakup and then a potential reconciliation or a period where they're moving on. So let's get the basics out of the way first. There are generally 8 stages in the wheel. So your dumper wants someone to love them, stage 1. Stage 2 is they find someone, they think, oh, my troubles are over. Stage 3, they start to notice some worrying things. Stage 4, they start to think of leaving. Stage 5, they actually leave. Stage 6, I'm so happy that I left. Stage 7, I'm starting to feel kind of lonely. And then stage 8, why can't I ever find the right person? Which of course leads them back to stage 1, and then the wheel kind of goes around and around and again. Now, the brilliance of the concept is that you can almost look at someone who is a dumper who has an avoidant attachment style, and they are caught in this cycle where every relationship, either with an on-again, off-again situation or with a new person, is going through the cycle. And they're just simply using new parties to kind of replace on the revolution around the wheel. Now, the specific stage that we're going to be talking about in this discussion is really stage number 6, the I'm so happy that I left stage. This is typically where dumper's relief comes into play. But understanding how long you can expect this dumper's relief to last depends on you having a basic understanding of the way the entire wheel works. So if you end up looking at the graphic on my website, you'll notice that really the 8 stages are divided in half. The first 4 stages really are the relationship category, and the last 4 stages are the breakup category. So this is important because most people only look at the breakup category and make calculations based on that. But I think it's important to understand how the whole wheel works so you kind of get an honest accounting of what it's like for a dumper and the amount of emotions they're going from high to low, back to high, back to low. So let's kind of create a death wheel timeline, if you will. Now, everything I'm about to talk about here, I actually talked about in one of my previous videos, which is called I Figured Out When an Ex Will Reach Out to You. And I was using it to try to figure out when an ex is most likely to reach out to you on their own accord. And basically in that video, I spent a day trying to figure out how long each of the stages on average will take on the wheel. Now, figuring this out caused me to combine some of the stages. So here's kind of how I broke it down. Stages 1 and 2, the I want someone to love me and I found someone, my troubles are over. I consider that to be the honeymoon stage. I think it's stage 3 here. I'm noticing some worrying things. I consider it to be the anxious trigger stage. Stage 4, the I'm thinking of leaving stage, is the avoidant trigger stage. Stages 5 and 6, the I've decided to leave the relationship and I'm so happy that I left the relationship. This, in my opinion, is called the separation elation stage. And then stage 7 and 8, the I'm starting to feel kind of lonely, why can't I ever find the right person, is the depression and nostalgia stage. Again, we're really interested in the separation elation stage, but we need to understand how it fits into its surroundings first. So let's talk through how long each of these stages will typically last. Now, In the other video, I did this kind of by color coding the wheel. The 4/5 main stages I talked about as the honeymoon stage, the anxious trigger stage, the avoidant trigger stage, the separation elation stage, the depression nostalgia stage. Each of them I kind of gave a color coding thing. But let's kind of just go through each stage so that you can understand how dumper's relief really comes into play. So the honeymoon stage, which is comprised of the very first two stages of the I want someone to love me stage and I found someone, my troubles are over stage, is exactly what it sounds like it would be. It's that moment in time at the beginning of a relationship that you don't really see the other person's flaws at all. Everything's great. It's all sunshine and rainbows. Now, the reason I think it lasts an average of 6 months, so in my opinion, the honeymoon stage can last around 6 months, is I put a question to my private Facebook support group earlier this year where I basically asked them, hey, how long was your relationship with your ex before you broke up? And by far, out of the 75 people who answered that question, the most common answer was 12 months. And then the research I found seemed to indicate that usually the honeymoon period lasts about half the time of a non-spousal relationship. So 6 months was the answer. Hence, the first two stages of the honeymoon period on average is going to last around 6 months. Next, we enter into sort of stage 3, the I'm noticing some worrying things about my partner, or the anxious trigger stage. I think this lasts roughly about a month. And in order to understand how this works, we must first understand the most common pairing that we have in our coaching practice. So this year, my team and I have grown quite fond of attachment styles. So much so, in fact, that we learned that our average client has an anxious attachment style and our average client's ex has an avoidant attachment styles. This means that the average pairing that on average we are going to be seeing, I seem to be saying average a lot, I apologize for that. But the average pairing is going to be our clients will be anxious and their exes will be avoidant. This pairing really isn't ideal since it's a lot like mixing oil and water. At first, neither couple will notice anything wrong with the other. They're riding high on the honeymoon period. But eventually something will happen. And usually that something is their partner's anxious behavior starts seeping through, and it makes them take notice, eventually triggering the next stage, the avoidant trigger stage, which I believe comprises stage 4 on the wheel, the I'm thinking of leaving stage. This can last roughly around 2 months. So this is the stage where the ex or the soon-to-be dumper / avoidant, actually their avoidant side kind of gets triggered. So typically on this stage, you're going to notice that your ex is distant. You'll ask them, what's wrong? And they'll respond, nothing. But deep down, you know something is wrong because behind the scenes, your ex is really planning their escape. And then, of course, we have sort of the separation elation stage, which comprises the moment they actually leave the relationship to that stage where they're saying, oh, I'm so happy I left. This can last anywhere between 1 and 2 months. Now, this stage encompasses the actual breakup / escape as well as the dumper's relief. So in attachment theory, more specifically, there's a term for this, and it's called separation elation. One of my favorite attachment style websites, Free to Attach, defines it as after a relationship ends, people with an avoidant attachment style tend not to show much anxiety or distress, often feeling an initial sense of relief at the relinquishing of obligations and the sense that they are regaining their self-identity and not tending to initially miss their partner. This is separation elation, as the pressure to connect is gone. Dumper's relief. The crazy part is that most exes believe this relief feeling will last forever, and it emboldens their stance that they made the right decision, but that elated feeling that they get, it's fleeting. It doesn't last forever. And as high as they feel now about the breakup, they're about to feel low in a moment, for the next stage is the depression and nostalgia stage. This is where they start to feel kind of lonely. They start to feel sorry for themselves. Why can't I ever find the right person? This will last right around 2 months or more. So one of the oddest things that I took to heart over the past 2 years is this really odd idea of avoidant nostalgia. So people who have, or dumpers potentially who have the avoidant attachment style, literally prefer something called phantom exes because there's no threat of a reconciliation. I've talked a lot about this concept in one of my videos entitled How to Make an Avoidant Ex Miss You. Check that out if you haven't already. But basically, with the danger of reciprocity, I suck at English, I apologize. So particularly after an ex has moved on, liberation from the fear of engulfment finally gives free rein to an avoidance latent romanticism. An ex being truly unavailable may even produce a perverse enjoyment. They are finally at liberty to fully miss and think wistfully of them. Well, it also confirms their self-belief that people won't stick around them. Sometimes in relationships, they may imagine their partner with another to trigger this. So often, this is why we're seeing exes who don't really miss past partners until that person has completely moved on. I've talked a lot about this phenomenon of the moving on sort of situation where you move on and then all of a sudden after you've moved on, your ex comes back into the picture wanting to rekindle things. And this most likely means that they're falling victim or falling prey to this concept of avoidant nostalgia. So the separation elation stage, really we're looking at how long does dumpers relief or breakup relief actually last? Because it can be disheartening when you're dealing with an ex who just seems to throw you by the wayside and seems over the moon about it. And in my opinion, the separation elation they feel, it's kind of dependent on the stages that came before it and after it. So to recap, you sort of have this honeymoon stage, which is an emotional high, and that lasts long, 6 months. And then after the honeymoon stage, they have the anxious trigger stage, which lasts 1 month. This is where they're not hitting a low, but the roller coaster, so to speak, is starting to fall. And then, of course, you have this avoidant trigger side. That's where they start to hit the low. That's where they start to avoid. They start to look for a way out. That's where they start to feel themselves growing sad. They mourn the breakup. They start their stages of grief, sometimes even before the breakup has occurred, because they're already planning on doing it in their head. And that's why with the anxious trigger stage, it only lasts a month. The avoidant trigger stage can last 2 months. And then after it's done, they have a high again, especially if they're an avoidant attachment style. So the one thing interesting about avoidant attachment styles is that they really adore the concept of independence. And after they break up with you, they start to feel independent again. And that is what bleeds into the separation elation concept. It's also why this can average anywhere between 1 month or 2 months. And a lot of times people get very disheartened because it seems like their ex is doing great without them. Sometimes even when the separation elation stage wears off, because inevitably it will wear off, the avoidant will try to replace you with someone else to stave off the next stage, which is the depression and nostalgia stage, which can last more than 2 months. No. Breakup relief may sound like it will last forever for a dumper, but I assure you it will subside. So try not to panic if you're dealing with a dumper that seems over the moon about the breakup. The toll will come.